All right, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Politely Dangerous podcast. This is episode 1, which I am super excited for. Today we have a very special guest, Miss Asha Miller.
Hello.
Make sure I'm saying it correctly.
Yes.
All right. Who will be talking to us about an array of things today. But I don't want to speak too much. I'll let you introduce yourself the way that you like to introduce it, and then we'll kind of just get into it.
Sounds good. So yes, my name is Asha Miller, and I am a speaker. I call myself more a storyteller. I love sharing stories, my story, in hopes that it can help others share their story. My grandmother is my biggest inspiration when it comes to storytelling. She was honestly the world's greatest storyteller. And she passed away from cancer, but left such a legacy of stories. So I'm a storyteller. I also have a column that I write. I love writing. It's my first love. And I do a bunch of other things. I love advocacy.
You're super busy.
I never know. I'm a creative.
I love that.
So a number of things that basically encompass being able to help others in some capacity. And my word is, for my life, is legacy. Like, what can I do? What projects can I do? What nonprofits can I partner with? What research studies can I do that can leave a legacy of love and change behind me? So that is who I am. I'm a mom, too, of the two most incredible kids. I am not biased. Ask anyone. And so yeah, I grew up in Trinidad until I was about 6 years old, but I still say I grew up Trinidadian, and then grew up the rest of the way in New York City, in Brooklyn.
New York. Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you once again for being here. So one of the things that we definitely want this podcast to encompass is exactly what you said. Telling a story, allowing people to come on and tell their story in their own way, and to, really just let the world know what they've been through, how they have overcame adversity, and just sharing their journey in hopes to inspire someone else that, may be going through the same thing or a different thing, but still, they find inspiration through, whatever you say. And, we spoke before, and I know that today we're going to get into a lot of good stuff. I don't know how long we're even going to talk, we won't even put a time on it. But so with it being also breast cancer awareness, I'm very honored to have you as my first guest. And I know when we spoke, one of the things I want to kind of start on is you call yourself a breast cancer veteran and not necessarily a survivor. If you could speak on that more, why you chose that terminology instead.
Yeah, for sure. So for me, whenever I think of the word survivor, I think of something that has passed. So if you are, say, a car crash survivor, a fire survivor, you never have to go back into a fire.
Right.
Weekly or monthly or yearly. You don't have to repeatedly crash your car or anticipate that that's going to have to happen. But with cancer, we have this thing where when you see somebody who's gone through cancer and you see them maybe a year or two after, you look at them and you say, but you're good now,
you
right?
You made it.
Yeah, you're good, right? So everything's good. And it's more of an accusation than even like a question. Leaves no room for my grief, for my story, for anything. But when we think about veterans, I just think that we understand, at least now, I think society is beginning to understand that there has been a before, there is a present, and there's an after to the trauma that they've gone through. And so for me, encompassing the word breast cancer veteran is saying, hey, I've gone through a lot of things. I'm still going through a lot of things. And cancer is a lifelong diagnosis. It's a chronic illness. And that's something I just didn't know before I was diagnosed. And it's something I really want to make sure others understand is that it continues. It's an ongoing, and many of us are diagnosed with PTSD. Right. Many of us are diagnosed with mental health issues as well. And so that also just leaves space for our grief, for our experiences to say, we are cancer veterans. We're continuing, and to hopefully people will honor that.
Yeah, it's a little ironic you say that, because when you think of like the military, we don't call them like, you're a war survivor.
Yeah.
It's It's like, no, you're a veteran. You
Yeah.
know, you've gone through it and you're still going through it. And, you know, we treat it a little different. Now, I definitely want to get into your story, but I really want to make sure that we educate people today, too. You know, when we spoke, it's funny because I think in our society, we almost celebrate breast cancer. And like you said, there's kind of like a lot of things that go around it, you know, in that sense. You know, we wear the pink and we have the parties and the 5Ks. But if you don't mind, just kind of educate people on, you know, specifically breast cancer, because obviously we have different types of cancer. My grandmother actually had lung cancer, and I didn't know how it affects the bodies differently. So if you could just kind of educate people on what it is, kind of like what you go through, maybe like the different types of treatment and things like that.
So there is a plethora of different types of breast cancer, which is crazy because when I walked in a 3-day, 60-mile type of an event 8 years before I was diagnosed. And I raised thousands of dollars. It was all about save the tatas and like pink tutus and like all these like bras hung up and through the streets. And to tell you the truth, like it was so commercialized. I left there thinking I knew, but I knew nothing. I remember sitting there going, somebody's celebrating 20 years of being a survivor. Why are you celebrating? Aren't you done? Like it's been over. Like what are you celebrating? I had no idea that it was a lifelong diagnosis and the fear of reoccurrence is so high. And so that's one of the reasons I give a lot of grace to people that don't know, because when you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah, you don't know. Yep.
So there are different types of breast cancer. My kind specifically is ER, PR positive, HER2 negative. Wow. And I will explain what that is, which is basically estrogen and progesterone positive, meaning that the estrogen in my body was actually feeding the cancer. Wow. So what's God-given, you know, makes me, you know, more like a woman per se. It was actually the thing that was feeding the cancer. And then HER2 negative, it's just kind of the type, it really is more the type of treatment that you're going to get available. So there's triple negative as well. And triple negative means that it's not fed by estrogen, progesterone. It's not, you know, has nothing to do with the HER2 gene. So that is the most aggressive type of cancer. And ironically, more Black people and Caribbean people are the ones that get that type of cancer.
Do they know why, or that's just something?
So there's still research trying to be done to see, you know, exactly why, because we are dying at a higher rate. We have more aggressive cancers. It's just unfair and ridiculous. And so, yes, triple negative is highly aggressive. Typically within the first 5 years, it does reoccur. After 5 years, there is a dip in reoccurrence. But ER/PR positive, which is the kind I have, it actually is less likely to reoccur in the first 5 years. But it's actually 20 years before I'm considered like cancer-free or remission, because it kind of just lingers because there's estrogen in our bodies, and you can't take all of it away. There are treatments to lower that estrogen, and I'm supposed to be right now like on a 10-year treatment so that I can try to lower that estrogen in my body. I've chosen to do it naturally. So everything I put on my body, how I eat, in my hair, everything that I do naturopathic treatments every day to try to lower the estrogen naturally in my body, because that is the thing that was feeding the cancer. So those are just two of, there's inflammatory, there's different types, but there's several different types of cancers out there. And when you're diagnosed, you have to try to become an expert on that cancer. And then as you become an advocate, you try to also learn about the other types of cancer. It is a lot of knowledge. We go through like our own little medical school. Because
I feel like you hear like cancer and everyone just thinks, oh, well, it's just cancer. Like, but there's more depth to it. You know, like I said, there's lung cancer, there's breast cancer, and then what are the other types?
I mean, there's like lymphoma for blood cancers, you know, there's bone cancers, kidney, there's literally every organ in your body could almost like, you know, your bone, the reoccurrence typically comes, at least for breast cancer, in your brain or bones, you know, if it comes back again. So that's what people don't understand. So if I have a hip pain, I have to start thinking, okay, when did this start? How long has this been going on? If I have a headache for too long, they're like, when did this start? You have a cough, lung can't, it can metastasize to your lungs. And so there's that teetering between fear and faith, right? There's that teetering between, okay, is that cough, and you're freaking out every minute. You can't live your life like that. So you got to live, but also be aware, but live, but be aware. And sometimes that just gets exhausting.
Yeah, I mean, that's even just life in general, trying to get through, everything going on. So, and like, I'm glad that you said all that, because like I said, growing up, I didn't know much about cancer. I just thought like it was one type, it was just cancer. And, I know like when my grandma got it, and then even if you could talk about this more, like there's stages.
Yeah.
So on top of getting cancer, you could be in already a stage 3.
Yeah.
I know she was stage 4 when she found it, which basically, and you can talk more about it, is like, hey, like
it's metastatic.
Not much we can do at this point.
Yeah. And so, there's 4 stages, stage 1, and then there's actually like little increments in them. So there's stage 1A, stage 1B, stage 1C, and many of the stages, it just means like the size of the tumor, the positioning of the tumor, has it spread to the lymph nodes, outside of, that space, has it spread to the blood, like all of that, is encompassing. There's also grades. So there's grades 1, 2, 3, and that shows how aggressive it is. So for me, it was, further along for both of those things. And when I first started, I was like, I don't know, I've never heard of grade before, but that just talks about how aggressive the cancer is. And typically in Black people, we have more aggressive cancers, and it's found at later stages many times because we're not believed by our doctors, or there's not less access to care, or sometimes also we're not talking about it with ourselves. We're not talking about, hey, go get yourself checked. Are you doing your self checks every month? I think as even specifically as Black men too, is just like taking control of your health, and also encouraging others in your circle to find value in that.
I'm gonna do it. Well, thank you, Dr. Miller, for for giving us all the insight today. Yes. But like I said, I think that around like we talked about the word cancer, there's a lot of, like you said, just kind of the commercial stuff, and we don't really take time to educate ourselves on it. So I appreciate you kind of giving us that knowledge. So I want to dive into your story because it's so. It's really just crazy.
It's crazy.
Like when you told me, I just kind of was sitting there like, man, this woman is strong to go through all this. So before you even became diagnosed, if you could kind of just talk about everything before that, because you had a lot of things happen in your life before you even were diagnosed with cancer.
Yeah. So my very first surgery was at 11 years old. And I had a major surgery for scoliosis. So I have 2 very large curves in my spine. That's what scoliosis is. And so they had to cut my back open and take 2 Harrington rods and put it on either side. But then they took bone. So they had to cut my hip bone open, saw off part of that, and take that bone to fuse the rods onto my spine.
All this at 11.
All of this at 11. I had to learn to walk again. It was crazy, but I look back and I printed out my own in the library. Those perforated line ones that you kind of tear off. Okay, maybe I don't know. Maybe you do. But
I'm old. I ain't that old. But
it was like your little Apple IIgs computer. So I was like, yes, I was just a little kid. And I was like, this is great. So I tore it off. I colored it and everything myself with Bible verses to put up in my room. And but I didn't really let the grief of what happened sink in that moment. And I carried that fear with me of doctors, because the doctor walked into that room, he saw me there and he said, you could die in the surgery.
Right.
And I thought, I'm 11, dude. Like, what are you doing? But I carried that fear into my adulthood. And I had a plethora of different pains and aches. And so finally, I would have this one pain that just, it wouldn't go away. And they thought, I think it's a cyst on your uterus. So we're going to go in laparoscopically. This was in 2016, the top of 2016. They said, we'll go in, we'll take it off. Simple. And I thought, okay, I've had about 5 surgeries before that. So I was like, okay, easy peasy,
It's been there.
Yeah, I got this. So we went in, I woke up and everything felt weird. It just felt strange, my mind, body, and spirit. And I thought, I know how I feel after surgeries. I heal really well. I don't know what's wrong. I'm in way more pain. Here, they cut through my C-section scar and they had to completely open me up. There was complications in the surgery and they took one of my ovaries.
Wow.
When I found that out, I was devastated and confused. But the thing that they should have told me was that's also going to impact your mental health. It's a high probability. Your ovaries have those hormones. And as women, like it regulates our moods, our mind, everything. It's chemical. And they failed to tell me that that would happen. So shortly after, I started to get really, really depressed. And this is a trigger warning for anyone about suicide and depression. But yeah, I got extremely suicidal. I had severe anxiety, and coming out of that, it was so hard. That's when I realized the lack of care in the mental health system, the lack of access. For you to be in a place where you're like, I'm suicidal, I need help. Like I knew that I needed help. Yeah. I was like, I want to kill myself almost every day, and that's not who I am. And I have 2 babies, and I was like, no, I'm fighting for them because I love them so much. And to be in that place and not be able to get the help you need. People were telling me, go to your PCP, your primary care physician, and let them, And while I'm not negating, like if that is what you need to do to get the medicine you need, do it. But I think there has to be a better way. Yeah. I always say you don't want to go to a brain surgeon if you have a cough, And so I fought to find a psychiatrist. I fought to find a mental health professional that was tied to a psychiatrist that could prescribe medication. So if I would need it, I had it available. And it took months to do that. So many phone calls. And thankfully, I had a support system that was able to help me with some of those. But some people don't have that. Yeah. So clawing out of that, finding a amazing therapist that was connected to a psychiatrist, that helped tremendously. I was able to do a lot of talk therapy and being able to speak and get out. And I found a gym and I started going there more for just to get out, to be among people, but no one knew I was talkative. So I could just slide in and they weren't like, what's wrong, Asha? They were just like, hey, she's a quiet girl. Yeah. And I did my little, workout and I would leave. As time went on, I started to feel the difference, not just physically, because I had gained about 30 pounds too during the depression and everything. But also just mentally, spiritually, even. I always tell people it's a spiritual thing too, just moving your body and getting active. So I started to move my body, started to lose weight, started to get fit, started to see myself in a different way and feel strong, completely, body, mind, and spirit. And I loved it. I got it super addicted. And I'm still to this day, I think, super addicted to the gym. But it was not because of the baby muscles I saw, which was great. Right. But it was
just the feeling.
It was the feeling mentally. I am stronger than I thought. Yep. I can get through this. And my faith was even strengthened. I would be listening to Rihanna in the gym and I'd just be like, thank you, Jesus.
Shout out to Riri.
Shout out to Riri. Yeah. So it was, so the people that own the gym, they said, hey, you are so inspirational. It's amazing what you're doing. So we would love to.
Did they know about your diagnosis?
No, anything? They just knew that I came in there quiet as a mouse. Right. And then I was in every class. I was just in there killing. I loved it. Any class that was there, I was there.
And they're like, you're here a lot.
Yeah, they're like, what? I was like, I am here. Sometimes I would do 4 workouts in a day.
Wow.
That was my mental
addicted.
health journey. And, you know, I backed off as my mental health started getting better, but it was just so like, it was my lifeline in some ways. It's where I prayed, I praised, where I cried, where I laughed.
Yeah.
It was my sanctuary. So
I'm glad you brought that up. We'll shift gears real quick and then we'll shift back. But, you know, especially in our community, you know, my mom actually just started working out too. And she'll text me like, I feel so much better. You know, I feel that that's not something that we took or that we take as serious in our community, working out, you know, mental health. You know, with our cultures, there's a very strong, like, kind of pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and there's no crying, and the world is not fair. You know, so as you're growing up, you know, Black or, you know, Caribbean or whatever it may be, our cultures don't really have that integrated in them to where, you know, we talk about our feelings and our emotions, because through centuries and generations, they didn't have that. Yeah. You had to figure it out, or, you know, you can, in a way you died, you know.
Or you got to pray it out, right?
Yeah, you got to pray it out.
I know. They're like, hey, just pray about it. You know, you're sad, just pray. And I'm like, you could have Jesus and a therapist. You know, you can have both.
Jesus made the therapist.
Yes.
Or God created the therapist, you know. So
yeah. So that's so true. It's the mental health is not talked about. It's a lot of talk it out, but quietly. Pray it out loudly. But it's not a matter of like, you can also seek help if you need it. You can also talk about it out loud to others so that they know that they're not alone. Again, storytelling, right? Telling your story can hopefully empower others to feel like they're less alone. They're not crazy, you know, and it can really help to, I think it really can help to save lives, because when we share our stories of, hey, I went to see a therapist, maybe somebody who's really, really struggling can hear that and want to go and do it as well.
Well, he did. Well, I know this guy, and he did it. So
exactly.
No, I love that. Like I said, that's something I hope that within our community. I feel like things are changing, and you're seeing more Black men are going to therapy. You know, they're becoming therapists, and you know, we're talking about it. And you can start to see the tide slowly starting to change. And it's necessary, because there's a lot of trauma in our community. It just gets passed down. There was something I was reading, it was saying, like, you know, stress and anxiety, it's not just psychological, but it's you know, it could be hereditary.
Yes,
you know?
I read that study too, and that it's actually passed on genetically, the trauma. And so that is something too that I'm like very focused on, like breaking those generational, you know, bonds, and saying, I want to change that. You know, I want to change that with my kids. I want them to not hold all that trauma. So my daughter, 3 years old, she was in therapy. I was like, baby girl, I already know. I probably traumatized you already. So
welcome to the
go
world
over there, you know, but it's so normalized to my kids. They're like, oh, yeah, it's been a while. I think I need to see a therapist. And I'm like, bet, let's go. But I think it's normalizing it from young as we continue to get older. And then also those of us that are grown, just normalizing that conversation among our friends and our family.
Because it should be normal.
Exactly. And educating that way. I
love that you do that with your kids. One thing that was really big for my sister and I when we were growing up, and, you know, shout out to my mom, you know, as much as with mothers, you know, they can stress you out, you know, things like that. Man, she just gave us so many things at a young age. She would always tell us, I want you to break the cycle. And I was like, girl, I don't know what you're talking about. What cycle? But she just meant, like, she knew even in her mind, like, there is a cycle that our family has, that other families have. And she would tell my sister and I, like, you two are going to break the cycle. Wow. You're going to restructure our family tree. And that's a lot of pressure, you know, when you think about it. But also what an honor to, like, know that now our bloodline will be forever changed, because my mom made the decision to, you know, put that in us to change. And then, you know, I think I told my sister the other day, I was like, I think you're the first one in our direct bloodline to graduate from college.
Wow.
I said, you know how amazing that is? I was like, you beat me to it. I was like, but, you know, I was like, you were the first one. You're, like, now your kids and their kids and their kids will forever, like, their lives will be changed. So I love that you do that with your children as well. So hopefully more people will take note of that and, do that same thing. So
they're never too young, to start just knowing that you can reach out and help, and that it doesn't just have to be your parents talking to you, but it could be another person, a trusted therapist.
So I'm sure they'll be great friends too, because they'll know how to help their friends. They're gonna be the go-to friends when they get older.
Oh, my daughter, she's already dropping some gems. She's with her school counselor. They come in and she's like, "Mom, these kids are not listening, but I listen because I know when I grow up there might be things that I'm angry about, and it's like, I hope it's not the past stuff, and I'm like, baby girl, you're 9. What?
Man, to have that at a young age, I wish. Ooh, there's still stuff I struggle with. I'm like, man, if I would have known at 10 that this wouldn't have mattered, I'd be in a better place. So, all right, I want to shift back to your story. So you were in the gym, your life was, back on track. You could say you're feeling good. They're asking you to be involved at the gym. And then adversity strikes again. Yeah.
And that's the thing, right? So it's like, okay, things are good. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling the healthiest I've ever felt in my life. Mind you, I had never, nobody thinks about it now because I'm like a gym rat, but I had never stepped foot in front of in a gym before that moment. Right. And so I knew my body now better than ever. The gym, they asked me to be a fitness instructor. I was like, no. Then I said yes. And now, I still am. And I started teaching. And just a couple months after I started teaching, I'm in the shower and my knuckle grazes against something underneath, underneath my armpit, it felt like. And I thought, that's a little strange. But I knew I'd been working out so much. Right. I thought, okay, maybe it's a lymph node or something that's like popping in and out or something. Right. And I should probably keep an eye on that, because one thing I didn't want to do was have to go back to any doctors and have surgeries, ironically. So I checked it out. I talked to my partner at the time, my mom, and I was like, hey, I found this little tiny bump. And they said, well, keep an eye on it and keep, checking. So about a month or two later, my mom asked me about it again. Crazily enough, I didn't feel it. And that's why I'm very big on the way we do chest exams, because it's men and women, right. Everybody. But you have to check in a certain position, in a certain time. Make sure that you rotate your arm back and you rotate your arm forward when you're checking under your armpit. There's like little divots and, things. So I didn't feel it the second time. And I thought, I'm good. Yeah. About a month or so later, I felt it again. And I'm like, okay, this thing keeps popping out. Yeah. This is weird. And it was not, I want to make sure and be very clear. This was like a 0.5 centimeter, y'all. Like tiny. It wasn't some great big tumor. I wasn't sick. It wasn't growing. It wasn't hurting. All of the things that we think that we know. Everything was good. I hijacked my daughter's preschool appointment for her entrance into preschool and asked our family doctor, I'm like, hey, can you just check out this weird little bump? And she's like, sure. She pulled me in. She checked it out. She's like, oh my goodness, I wouldn't even feel this on an exam. I could barely feel it. It's so tiny. But she said it's soft, so it doesn't feel like anything alarming. Yeah. But you can go do an ultrasound if you'd like. Like that. Yeah. Let's go. So I did the ultrasound. It came back and the nurse on the phone said, everything looks great.
Nothing to see.
She's like, everything looks great. If anything changes in the next couple months, you let us know. But we can't be 100%, but everything looks great. But it was that one phrase that she said that changed it for me. And the crazy thing is, years later, I actually called that office and was able to talk to that nurse and tell her, she's like, I don't even remember saying that, or anything. Oh, wow. But it was that changed for me. She said, we can't be 100%. And that for me, everything in my life was at 100 at that moment. I was mentally, spiritually, physically at 100. So I said, how do we know 100%? Yeah. She said, there's one more test. It's a biopsy. I'll tell you, Leek, I didn't know what a biopsy was. Okay.
I wouldn't have either.
I was like, sure, do whatever. But it does involve a needle. Yeah. And typically an ultrasound where they are seeing, where the needle's going in, and they're taking a sample of that, little tiny bump, and they're going to send it to pathology to see exactly what it is. So I said, okay, let's do it. I remember driving up that day just thinking, you're ridiculous. This is so ridiculous. And I say this because I think many times, I think as men and women both, but I think especially as women, we are discounted as being over emotional and making a lot of things up in our minds. And sometimes that is the very things that affect our mental health, because we're constantly having to second guess, are my feelings valid? Are they real? Is it true? And I want to say, trust those feelings, trust that God has entrusted us with those feelings.
I feel like over emotional sometimes that's a bad term, because over just means like, no, I'm really feeling this in my gut. I really, like, you're being too emotional about it. It's like, no, I'm telling you, like, my emotions are very strong about whatever it is, to the point that it's driving me to just be like, I got to handle this because it's driving me insane.
Yes, exactly. I think it's like, I always tell my daughter, I'm like, you have so much emotions. You're so emotional. And I want to keep telling you this in a positive way. So I tell her all the time, that is so beautiful. You are so emotional, because that was something that wasn't told to me growing up. It was like, girl, you better stuff that back into the envelope it belongs in and seal it up. And so I got up there, the amazing doctor. He was practicing for like 30 plus years as a surgical oncologist. And he did the ultrasound guided biopsy, showed me on the screen and everything. And he's like, hey, this all looks fine. There's no shadow. It looks soft. He could barely even he was like trying to get a sample. He's like, I'm taking almost the whole thing. It's so tiny. Yeah. Like, the thing was like maybe a half a centimeter. And he took it out, and I said, I know you probably can't tell me, but what do you think it is? And he said, honestly, I think it's just a cyst. I think you'll be fine. Everything is good. You can take it out if you want. I was like, you better believe I'm taking it out. And I left. I had no anxiety leaving that office. So 2 days later, when the call came, what I thought was the reminder of my appointment. So that was on a Thursday. I got that call. The biopsy was on a Monday or Tuesday. And I had a follow-up appointment on that Friday, and they're like, hey, just come in and we'll talk about whatever it is and next steps. So I thought, hey, this is the reminder. It's 8:00 Thursday morning, September 28th, 2017. And I get a call, and I actually answer it, and I lay the phone on the counter because I think it's a recording. And I go about brushing my teeth, getting ready to get my son off to school. And all of a sudden, I'm like, I think it's somebody on there, and it's the doctor.
Yeah, they're actually speaking to me.
He is speaking, and I said, I'm so sorry. I really don't know what you said. And he goes, the biopsy came back, and it's breast cancer. And for me, at that moment, I felt like I left my body. And only this year, being the first year in 6 years, I haven't had a surgery or a procedure. I feel like I'm finally coming back home to her. It has been the longest 6 years of my life.
I can only imagine.
But in that moment, it was like I left, and it was like I was looking at myself outside of myself and going, oh, that poor girl, I don't know what she's going to do. But I'm not going to be here for it.
Right.
You disconnect sometimes in those really traumatic moments. And that's what I did. I disconnected so much that when I hung up the phone, I didn't realize I was crying and almost screaming until my son, he was 8 years old, came up and he said, Mom, what's wrong? And I was like, I snapped out and I said, wow. I stubbed my toe. And I told him, I said, that was the first time and the last time I ever have lied to my son or my kids. But it was the silliest thing to say because they had seen me in excruciating pain and they knew that I don't scream, So he looked at me like, what? And I said, get on the bus. His bus just pulled up. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is insane. And I said, Mom will be okay. I sent him on the bus. My daughter was 3 years old at the time. And I told my partner at the time to put on a show for her. It was 8:00 in the morning. He's like, TV, you? And I said, yes.
He had
Yeah.
Had to know.
Yeah. And I had to tell him. And that was the first time I said it out loud.
Yeah.
It was the most surreal thing. And I don't know if it was you when we talked before, but I realized that in that moment, it was almost like, you almost think that, am I lying? Like, did I hear
this doesn't
that?
even sound right. Yeah.
I'm like, I'm telling him this. And this poor guy, because later on, I'm probably going to have to be like, just kidding. I misheard. That's not what he said. But it was so surreal. But this is the crazy God thing for me, was that because of the year before, I had a standing appointment with my therapist. Every Thursday at 9:00 was my therapy. And this was Thursday at 8 that they called. So I drove to my therapist. I was always like dressed nice. I was the one that came in like, hey, I'm a year later. I'm feeling better, positive. I came in there with like sweats, my hair, my eyes were all bloodshot. And he was like, what happened? And I told him, I have cancer. And he knew about the biopsy. He knew about those things, but we all just thought it was nothing. And I'll never forget, he looked at me and he said, Asha, what is going to ground you through this? And the first things that popped out of my mouth was, I am stronger than I ever thought possible. And God is good. And today, sitting here 6 years later, I can say those two things are definitely still true.
Yeah.
We don't realize the goodness of God until sometimes the crappiest things happen. And we don't realize how strong we really are until the crappiest of things happen. And the year before showed me that. I don't think we really understand sometimes our strength. And many times it's because sometimes we didn't have to use it, right? And so people go, I could never do what you did. But don't say that, because
you never know what
you
you'll
may
be
not.
in.
You may not know. But that moment, I will never forget that day. Later on that day, this is something actually I don't think I ever really shared anytime, but later that day, I cried and cried so much. My friend had a fashion show that she was in. And so I went and put makeup on, got on this fire outfit, and I was like, did my hair, and I'm like, I'm going to the fashion show and I'm going to cheer. And I walked in and people, it was so ironic because people were like, Asha, you look so good, girl. I'm like, thank you.
Right.
Thanks so much. And I sat there and I cheered for my friend. She didn't even know at the time. And she was waving and like everything was so good. And afterwards we walked away and I was like, girl, I have cancer.
She's like, huh?
She's like, what? This is so bizarre. And that's another thing. We don't know what people are going through. We have no idea the mental, physical battles. I remember driving there and just kind of swerving a little bit on the road because my mind was so heavy.
Just out of it.
And I thought, how many times do we drive behind people and we're like so mad that they're driving or whatever? We don't know. You have no idea. What if they just heard the most devastating news, or they're driving back from hearing, a diagnosis or death?
Yeah, just driving.
You have no idea. And so it reminds me every day to give grace to people, abundance of grace to people, because we truly don't know what other people are fighting. They can look fire going to a fashion shoot, but not realizing that just hours before they heard the most devastating news.
I'm actually reading a book right now, and one of the chapters was titled "Don't learn to not take things personal." And I can say that has been the most rejuvenating, mind shifting things I've ever read, because I am personally a person that takes things personally. I think I just
personal
alliteration, but I took a step back, and it's funny that when you think people are being rude or whatever it may be, you're putting that spotlight really on you. You're like you're making it's like me, like you're doing this to me, you're being this, like you don't even know what that person is going through. And I've learned that usually people are projecting. They're not necessarily mad at you or upset with you, most of the time, there's something internally with them that they're upset about or they're mad about, and you're the closest thing to them. So I've learned, like, whether I'm driving, if someone's mad or they flick me off, I'm like, brother, you got something going on. I'm not going to take it personal, because for you to get that mad about something, there's something else that's bothering you.
Something else.
You know, so, and I've learned that, you know, to just not take it personal, good or bad.
Yeah.
You know, and that's helped me so much. It's just like to understand that it's not about me.
Yeah.
Whatever's going on. So I'm glad that you said the book. Keep going.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you said that, because that's something that I'm learning too throughout this, good and bad. I love that you said that. So yeah, I really started self-diagnosing. I'm not going to lie to you. You know,
WebMD.
One thing I didn't do was the WebMD. I was like, because in 2 seconds you're dead. You're like, no, I'm sure I'm planning my funeral now.
Yep.
But one thing I started doing was I was like, okay, what do I know? I know it's probably going to be a lumpectomy, which just means that they take a portion of your breast that has the tumor and not the entire breast. And I thought, okay, I can live with that. I can, you know, roll with that. And then maybe some radiation, which is where they do radioactive waves on that area that had cancer to try to burn away any remaining cells. And I thought, okay, maybe I'll do that. And even my oncologist thought that. He sent me for a second opinion, which was the wisest thing, because I was obsessed with him. I was like, you're amazing. You're so nice. No, I'm not leaving you. And then he's like, go to a bigger hospital and get a second opinion. And when I did, I ended up finding out that tiny little tumor that I found, you know, was so tiny. No one could feel it. Not even me half the time. It was the tip of the proverbial iceberg underneath my chest. And there was a giant calcification of cancer against my chest wall. There was also, the cancer had already spread to outside of my breast to the lymph nodes. And so I ended up being deemed, after surgery, stage 3B. And for me, that was shocking. I was like, no, I'm going to be stage 0 or 1. Like, I'm not going to be those people like that have an aggressive kind of higher stage cancer. And mine was grade 3, which was a very aggressive cancer. And so they were like, we're hitting it with everything. You've got to do chemo now. They give you, which is something many people may not know this, because I didn't. They gave me 2 to 3 days to figure out, do I want to have future children?
Wow.
How do you do that? They said it's going to be this much thousands of dollars. And you're thinking, I'm going to be doing treatments that, I don't know if you also know this, but chemo is like 30 to 50,000 a session sometimes, okay? Depending on what type you have. I had a double chemo at the same time. So even if you're getting some of it paid by insurance, you're not getting the whole thing.
And you have to keep going.
Yes. And so, and you have, sometimes I had between 4 to 6 to 8 medications that you have to take. Also, each of those costs an exorbitant amount of money.
Yeah.
We were driving like 2 hours back and forth to my, for every chemo session. It's a lot. So you're sitting there going, how do you plan to, if I want to have kids more kids in 2 to 3 days, knowing that it's going to be thousands and thousands of dollars? No.
Yeah.
And that's not fair. One thing I will tell anyone that if they're listening, that they're newly diagnosed, is slow down. Now, don't slow all the way down that you stop,
right?
But slow down and take a breath, because they push us so fast and so hard, and everything is rush, rush, rush. It's too much. It's too much on our bodies and our brains. Yeah. And they could have given me 5 days instead of 3. You know, just an extra 2 would have even just cleared. But everything is very, very fast.
We got to do this now.
Yes, and if you don't advocate for yourself to say, I need more time, they're not going to give it to you. So that was one thing. We started the chemo. I had something called the Red Devil AC. And it is a red devil. It is 2 different types of chemo at one time. And it's red and they put it through your port, which you have to get underneath your skin, that goes directly in through your heart and, directly into your bloodstream. And it tastes like garbage in your mouth. Everything that goes through the port, you can taste. And it's weird. Jeez. Saline, when I smell alcohol, even like rubbing alcohol now, I'm like, I can taste it. And so it's, again, going back to that veteran status. If there's certain triggers that I have. I don't like rubbing alcohol because that smell just takes me back. I taste it in my mouth. I feel it in my throat. And so, we went through, I went through chemotherapy. I did 6 rounds, 4 rounds of the AC, and then I was supposed to do 4 more rounds of something called Taxol. Taxol, if anyone's listening and has done it, it is awful as well. It creates excruciating bone pain. That's one of the very main things that it does. Side effects that it does. And you also get a little patch on you that gives an injection, and it helps to boost up your white blood cell count because it drops really low and then you get really sick. So it helps to boost that. Well, I had a reaction and it started multiplying my white blood cells exponentially. So I ended up in the hospital for 5 days in excruciating bone pain. And it's things like that I never really heard. I heard the jingles on TV with the ball lady in the field running, and all of a sudden she's just like taking this medication and she's with her family and loving on them. But I didn't hear these stories, and it's not to scare anyone. It's just to say the reality isn't more to this. The pink tutus and the pink ribbons and the little 5Ks that you see. It's hard. It's excruciating. And when you go through going from the fittest I'd ever been. And my hair was like my glory. I was like, it's easy to do. It's super long. I was like, this is great. And I went from that to like bald, no eyebrows, no lashes. Things that people don't know. When you work out, all of that sweat, it doesn't have any eyelashes or eyebrows to catch it. It goes into your eyeballs. So then I had eye infections, things that I would have never thought of. And so you're going and switching. Who am I? Who am I bald without hair? Who am I if I'm not that gym rat killing it in the gym? If I can't be that active mom with my kids? And so it starts to redefine. So it's not just physically, but it's a mental struggle because you're constantly changing. So I changed from, within weeks of you starting your chemo, you lose your hair. You start losing it. And it's not pretty like the movies. It's in clumps.
When they're just like,
it's like, I had no idea I had that much hair on my head. It was a lot. But after chemo, I had my double mastectomy. They put expanders in your chest, which stretches the skin underneath it and keeps it. You actually have to get fills where they make it fuller and tighter to wait to put your implants in after radiation. And so radiation is something that really scared me. It was something I wrote about recently on my Instagram, and I got a lot of DMs, especially from Black people, because it's something that we don't see. We don't hear about. We hear about chemo, we hear about that, but we don't hear about radiation. And it burns you from the inside out. So 1 minute you're sitting there, you're like, I'm chilling. I'm good. I'm not going to be one of those people. I even slacked off on my lotion 1 or 2 days because I was like, this melanin is doing good for me. And then it was like, boom, 3rd-degree burns.
Insane.
Like, who knew? Nobody. And you Google it. You even Google today, you'll see maybe a few, and some of those are probably my friends who are now, starting to put it out there, maybe even me. But then you Google radiation burns on Black skin, and you can't find anything. It's like white skin, just scrolling. So you're like, what does it look like to me? What will I look like? Where is representation there? And that was one of the reasons I started sharing too, some of my pictures and my story. But radiation left me wrecked. I was exhausted. I was tired. I was tired of a lot of losses,
Yeah, I don't mean to cut you off, but during all of this, at some point, are you just kind of like, why me? Like literally like, what did I do? Because I mean, you seem like the nicest, kindest person, and I'm sure like anybody in your situation would take a step back and be like, what did I do to deserve this? Like, did you have those thoughts?
Yeah, for me, I remember distinctly. I actually just found the picture the other day. And this is something else. You're bringing up all the stories, okay? Y'all are getting all the tea.
Yeah.
But something I don't think I've ever shared when I've spoken before is I just recently found a picture and I was bald. I was just fed up. My kids went to their grandparents' house. My partner had left and with them, and I was alone. That's something we don't get a lot of. Just sometimes being alone. People care and it's wonderful, but sometimes you just need and I'm an empath. So I'm like, are you good? My mom calls me the Walmart greeter. I'm like, hello, are you feeling good? And it's like, I'm over here bald, like with a double eye infection. I'm like, how are you feeling today? And finally I was like, I don't have to take care of anyone.
Yeah.
I can just be. And when I did, the amount of emotions that started surging through my body, and a big one that I kept trying to push down was anger. I was so ridiculously angry. I was like, why?
Yeah.
Why? I have already gone through so much in my life. Like, why?
This makes no sense.
How?
Yeah.
Where? Like, I don't understand this. And so I got up and I was exhausted, in pain, and I just started trashing, like literally my house. And I'm not a trasher, okay? My house is like
spotless.
And I was like grabbing stuff. I was like, I'm gonna throw this chair over if I can't. I was livid. And I sat there and I just screamed and I cried and I let it out and I let myself and allowed myself the space to just feel the fury.
Yeah.
Yes, the humanness of the situation. I didn't have to be some super survivor. I didn't have to be some superhuman, some strong Black woman. I just had to be me.
Yeah, you're allowed to be human.
Yes, and I honestly didn't. Sometimes I think we need to hear that. Can you say it again?
You're allowed to be human.
Okay, thank you. Because I think sometimes we forget that.
Yeah.
And I remember then standing up and starting to put the things back and clean it all up, because there was no way it's going to say it like that. I'm not going to lie.
Your family's going to come home and be like, what happened here?
They're probably going to be like, it's about time. But I started cleaning up, which for me, cleaning is therapeutic. Yeah. And I started cleaning up the house, and I was like, I had a real talk with God. And that's when I realized, okay, I can trust you that you could heal me. And then the next moment, I had an encounter in my garage where it was, but what if I don't? What if I don't? What if you don't get healed? Then what?
Yeah, two great questions.
And for me, was coming to terms with those two is saying, from now on, I don't pray that I get healed. I pray that God's will be done. I'm like, listen, who am I?
Yeah.
You know? And so that for me was a pivotal turning point in my life, was saying, I'm going to trust that my healing can come. I'm also going to trust if my healing doesn't come.
I'm still good.
In either way, those two things that anchored me, right? They're still true. I am stronger than I ever thought possible, and God is good. And so when I finally came to head, but I had to break, and as you said, you could be human.
Yeah, you're allowed to.
Then it was like a breakthrough for me. Yeah. Now, things didn't get all better and rosy, but the whole thing, it was well with my soul, with my brain, mentally, spiritually. And that is the thing that can carry us, we don't realize, through so much more than we think we can handle.
Yeah, I totally agree. Just sometimes it takes that almost breakthrough, not to, be metaphoric there, but to just allow yourself to feel every emotion and be like, okay, what do I do from here?
Yeah.
Because like you said earlier, I feel like you're a joyous, happy person, and there was a time in my life where I went through a phase where I was just angry and depressed all the time. And I'm like, this isn't me. This isn't me. So it's like, what do I do to get back to who I am, even with everything that's going on in my life? And I think that's a big thing about mental health, is that people think when you're positive that you just think
Yeah.
everything is fine, it's good.
Yeah.
No, it's understanding that everything is not fine, but I'm
Yeah.
going to still encourage myself to push forward, to push through, regardless of the situation.
Or sometimes to just break down and rest.
Yeah.
You know, like you're like depressed and, you know, sad. That's not me. That was me this weekend. I had an amazing week, an amazing event. Then I poured my heart in, and it was everything was positive.
Yeah.
I came home and I broke down in my car, in my garage, and I couldn't stop weeping. And then I laid in my bed all day Saturday. And I'm saying that being very vulnerable, because the truth is that in that moment was what I needed. That was me. And that was okay to be like, girl, you are a depresso and you are tired and you got to lay in this bed.
Yeah.
And you're not changing out of your pajamas. You're not taking your bonnet off your head. You're just going to lay in this bed and you're going to just rest.
Your body was speaking to you. Like,
Yes.
I need you to just sit down for a
Yes,
second.
but I was like, I felt at first the pressure to post on my Instagram and say, oh, great event, wonderful time, you know, pumped. And it was a great event and it was a wonderful time. But we can do the power of and. It was a great event and a wonderful time. And I was exhausted and drained because this month is so
it's a lot
heavy
for
for
you.
many of us breasties. And so the power of and, you can be really sad and really heartbroken.
Two things can be true
and
at the same time. I love that. I'm going to have to steal that, the power of and.
Yeah.
Because I definitely feel that way sometimes where I'm like, long weekend, I'm like, Monday, we got to post this content. And it's like, well, why don't you just clean your house and maybe just go get a nice lunch and just chill for a little bit.
And maybe your content is that. And that's what I was just telling a friend this morning. I was like, she's like, I'm doing 75 hard and I'm going to post a day 21 when I feel good. And I'm like, post now.
Yeah, post it now.
Post now. We want to see the struggle.
Yeah, show us you're tired.
I want to see it. I want to see how tired you are. But sometimes we want to see that because we don't see that. You know, it's these curated, beautiful images everywhere. And so I went from fire pictures, you know, on Friday posting on my Instagram page. And if you saw on Saturday, I was laying in my bonnet with my pajamas on my Instagram going, hey guys.
Yeah.
And the reason I did that wasn't because I wanted to, but was because I said, what would I want to see? I want to see people being real.
Being real, yeah.
So.
And that's something I know I definitely have worked on, even with my social media over the years, like being vulnerable. You know, I did like 100 days, like no drinking, and I kind of shared it. And man, the response on that was like, you know, it was the most I talked to anyone, to that many people in direct messages, just like, you know, people were like, well, hey, like, you know, how long do you plan on doing this? And like, I love this for you. And I was like, man, just, you really never know what people are looking to you for as well. And I feel like we both have been blessed to be put in a position to be on a platform. Unfortunately, that comes with some pain.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes I feel when you are elevated, you have to go through struggles so that other people can relate to you. But the reward is that you get to help change lives with that. So
yeah.
And I'm sure you kind of feel that same way. Like you've
Yeah,
been through
there's
a lot.
a lot of responsibility, for sure. I go into every meeting and I'm like, listen, I'm going to talk about my babies and I'm going to talk about my community. And I bring them into every conversation. I tell my daughter now that she's wanting to advocate more. I tell her all the time, I'm like, remember, and she's like, remember my why, Mom, I got you. You know, tonight we're going to be speaking at OSU, and this is her first speaking engagement tonight. And she's 9 and she wrote everything down and
crush it. I already
she
know
was
it.
like, I'm remembering my why. And you have to, you know, to keep you mentally, just focused, you know, on why you're doing what you're doing. And
Agreed.
To me, that is everything.
So with the podcast being called Politely Dangerous, I think, you know, a lot of people kind of get confused by the phrase. It's kind of contradicting, but basically what it means is that, you know, it basically resembles people that are good people, kind people, good humans that are wanting to do the work you're doing, but in a sense they are dangerous. You know, basically odds against me. Watch out, because I'm still going to get through it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know, adversity, whatever it may be. Like you have that. I think the word dangerous has a negative connotation, but I think that you can be dangerous without being harmful. And that's kind of what this whole brand is based around is, you know, I can come in and I can wreak havoc, you know, and I think, who was that say? Good Trouble.
Oh, I know. I can't. Nope.
I'm losing my train of thought, but that was something that sparked me too. Is like, you know, Good Trouble. That's a contradictory statement, but it's like, no, like I'm using, you know, the things I've been through, my adversity. Like, you know, I could use it for bad in a dangerous way, but I'm going to become a dangerous person in my own right to where when I walk in the room, people are like, man, that person,
watch out for that one.
Watch out. You know what I mean? So what would you say are some things that, you know, make you, I guess, politely dangerous in your own sense?
Yeah. Well, for one, I'm a New Yorker.
Oh,
shout out to BK.
Yeah, y'all are a different breed. New Yorkers are different. Okay,
we are sometimes impolitely dangerous, but
but fair.
Yes. But yeah, on the real, like when I think about that for myself, I think about the way that I advocate. I like to even call myself a breast cancer activist on my page and even an advocate, because when it comes to advocating for myself, I had tended to be quiet, and I want to be the good Black patient. I don't want to be the one that causes trouble.
Right.
I want to be the good one that they are like, yeah, she's always so nice. Let's give her like the correct drugs or something, you know? Like, let's listen to her when she says she's in pain. Like, you know what I mean? But that's crazy.
I know, yeah.
I had to be like, wait, no, I have to start speaking up. I can fire my physician if I need to.
Yeah.
I can be polite, because that's something that I will always, you know, I'm not going to come out of who I am for you, but I will become the person that's like, she knows too much. She knows a lot. I read medical journals.
She's dangerous.
Yes. I have friends that are doctors I can turn to. Like I tell people, I may not know much about any other world, but you come to me and I will, you know, make sure and get you connected when it comes to breast cancer and research. And so I think for me, it's speaking up. It's speaking up for those around me, speaking up for myself. That makes me politely dangerous. I think it's also in the way that right now, the different avenues that I'm hitting. I have worked recently with, like last year with Victoria's Secret as a flat model, worked with Target introducing their swimwear line. I walked in New York Fashion Week.
Soft flex.
And listen, okay, we gotta speak. We gotta speak something. And for me, it's in those things, realizing, but I did all that with no breasts. And I wrote my most powerful articles that are, you know, in several magazines with no breasts. And I want to say that because the crazy thing is sometimes we have these dreams and we have these ambitions. We want to be dangerous. You know, we want to make an impact, but we don't realize sometimes it comes sometimes out of the most darkest times, the most adverse times. And sometimes we really have to go through that valley, really have to go through that darkness, really have to climb, like clawing up that mountain, dirt under your nails, knees in the dirt, you know, climbing up that mountain. And sometimes that climb, the thing is, that climb for me included Victoria's Secret and stuff. You know, you think, oh, that was when I reached the top, my pinnacle. No, that was the climb. And for me now seeing that light, because I'm like, oh, if others can see that beauty in me, I need to start seeing it in myself. I think that helped me to be politely dangerous, because I started to recognize the gifts that I was entrusted with. And I don't want to squander them. So I'm going to use them. And I'm going to use them in powerful ways, and standing now in confidence, not cockiness, but confidence in who I am and who I've been created to be.
I love that. I love that, because you definitely, you know, resemble everything that we, you know, the podcast stands for. Just like I said, just going through all that. And, you know, like when we spoke, I said, man, to sit here, to hear your story and to hear everything that you've been through, and to be able to still, you know, stand and sit with a smile on your face, with a grateful heart, a joyous heart. Not a lot of people can do that. So I want to commend you for that, for your advocacy, you know, and everything you've been through, and the work that you continue to do, because I know it's not done. And I know this will be something that you'll probably lifelong be doing, to help others. So you are appreciated. So thank you.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yes, I do. There's a lot of work to be done, and I think all of us can have a part, in it. And I appreciate you highlighting today the mental part of the struggle, because that's something that many people don't know and don't hear.
Right.
And honestly don't even ask about. It's just kind of like, again, like, you good.
Yep.
Like, you're good now. That's cool. And I'm like,
so proud of you. So happy for you.
Yes.
Like, proud of what?
You made it. Yeah. Oh, you beat it. You beat it. And I'm like, did I? I am beating it. It is a continuing process, It's an everyday, one step at a time. And I think for all of us with what we're going through in our own stories is taking that deep breath, making space for the good, the bad, the ugly, the power of and in our life.
I like that. You need to put that. Hey, that might have to be your book. First book, The Power of And.
Ooh, I like it.
Yeah. So tell everybody where they can find you, any work you have coming up, any events you want to put out there, just any last words that you want to share with us.
Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram at dearcancer_it's_me. People have been trying to get me on TikTok. I am, low key, but it's mostly the stalk people.
That and the funny videos and the recipes.
Or the ASMR. Yeah, I'm one of those girls. But yeah, you can find me there. I have this talk coming up tonight with, I'm working with some sororities too on campus. They're doing amazing work with wanting to reach out and really learn the realness of breast cancer and not just the pretty pink ribbons, which I think is beautiful to see young people wanting to go out there and really make a difference and an actual impact.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can follow me on there. There's a bunch of different ways sometimes to get involved. Right now, this is my second year in Columbus, so I am planning little local events and things like that.
Perfect place for it.
So it's been, my first one went off. It was amazing. It was incredible. And I'm excited to continue to just encourage and support the Columbus area.
Awesome. Any last words? Any last statements you want to share?
My last statement would be, if you got anything from me today, is if you are diagnosed with breast cancer or know someone is, please reach out. Please reach out. There's community there. There's resources there. Please hit me up on my Instagram. Send me a DM. I am there for you. I just never want anyone going through this to feel like they're alone and that there's not support. And those that are outside of the breast cancer community, you're also part of us. Yeah. So you are a breastie. We all are. You are now too.
Yep, I'm in it.
Hey, I'm going to get you a shirt. And take care of your mental health. Yeah. It's really, really important.
So vital. Well, thank you so much once again for joining us. I appreciate you guys listening. Our first episode here with Asha Miller, breast cancer veteran. So make sure you guys stay tuned, stay polite, stay dangerous. Have a great day.